Hello, everyone. This is Ehsan, CEO and co-founder of Codalio. I'll give you a bit of a history about, why we're doing this and why we started Codalio in general, and then obviously dive into the presentation. Before that, I wanted to introduce obviously our hosts here and also one of my collaborators to present for today. Key Logic is a software development company based in Sudbury, but also have operation and clients in Southern Ontario and also Waterloo region, Brampton and Toronto region. And Dean and his company are part of our early adopters. And they are going to help us out to put a different perspective into what we're presenting today in terms of how we are bringing a sort of our own tone into the whole mix of AI and coding things and how we fit into the spectrum of different services there. Reasons that we wanted to do this, and the main reason that we wanted to do Codalio in general as a company, we wanted to bring this idea into life, was simply because of the fact that in my experience and past experiences, what I realized is that bringing ideas to life, and in our case, in innovation, bringing ideas into the market is not that easy for a lot of us. We have some great ideas, but we have to go through so many, I guess, challenges, twists and turns before we realize how we can actually weave our idea into a product that people actually adopt. And in that experience, we learned so much by doing hundreds of projects in our previous company, which was a consulting company, helping people out to build MVPs, that we realized that we can actually use AI and leverage AI to do things a lot better, more efficient, and move things a lot faster. We wanted to come here and just try to give back to the community and tell you what spectrum of AI tools exist today and how you can leverage them to bring your ideas into fruition. And then at the end of the day, leverage those platforms, use those platforms to really get ahead of your game in many ways. Because if you don't, in a few months, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult situation that things are moving so fast in our innovation ecosystem that, again, if you don't use these types of platforms, you're gonna become sort of irrelevant. Hope that never happens. But these are some very useful tools that essentially puts you in a situation that you're competing with so many people that are moving at much faster speeds these days. We wanted to share the experience from the eyes and the lens of a founder, meaning that we always start with just a simple idea, and then we go through so many iterations, we go through so many, I guess, ups and downs and challenges trying to put this in front of our target audience and get the feedback, reiterate on them, and so on. And so what we're delivering here is going to help you out to not only prototype, build, experiment, test, and reiterate on it a lot faster, but also keeps you more engaged in that process with your potential targets, audience, and early adopters, obviously, from that sense. We hope that you can get a knowledge of the spectrum of different things, tools, and systems that do exist. We want you to really understand which one you should be leveraging for what specific use cases or challenges that you may be facing, and kind of give you an overview. And then as we start, we're going to start with the simple basic stuff that you may know. But as we progress into this presentation, you're going to be hearing more of the complex processes and flows. We want to do this in a casual, interactive, engaged way. So a lot of the content that we have on this slide, we don't have to go through all of them. If you have any questions, any specifics, any challenge that you're facing, and you want to kind of get the feedback from us to understand how you can leverage these tools, you can by all means jump in, pass, and obviously engage in the whole process. And you don't have to go through the formality. Just jump right in, raise your hand, jump right in. If you are joining us remotely, please do raise your hand. Or you know what, better put your questions in the chat. So as we are monitoring, as we're going through this process, one of my colleagues, fans here are going to be looking at the chats, and then we are going to be reflecting or answering those questions that may arise. We've all been hearing so much about the ChatGPT and OpenAI, and you may be surprised to know that the AI and the LLMs are actually disrupting software development more than anything else that we're seeing now. Why is that the case? Obviously, software is key to innovation. Almost every type of innovation that you touch has a software component. Whether it may be a device that you have a firmware that is sitting on the device, or a software or a tool or application or a mobile app that is extracting some data from essentially sensors, devices, or any backend platforms that visualize or give you services on those endpoints. You do need software everywhere. And so this slide is to just tell you that our claim about the fact that innovation in software and the way that we are accelerating the software development not only is important the way we see it, but prove it by numbers. Lovable and the Bold, as you can see them on screen, they grew from zero revenue to hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue within a very short amount. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lovable has become the fastest growing company ever built. And they are now obviously putting more layers into what they have been able to build. And they're going much deeper into the workflow of building prototypes. Replit has also been around for a very long time, 7 years. And in span of 7 years, they could only get to about around $10 million in ARR. But since the addition of the AI engine on top of it, they actually were able to mimic the same type of growth that we're seeing from the other. So 7 years into practice, they reached to about $10 million ARR. But then within 2 months after launching their AI engine, they moved from 10 million to about $100 million ARR. So it's not us that we're saying it is important to really look at the innovation and the, let's say, revolution that the AI is bringing to software development. By numbers, you can see how things are actually progressing and happening. We talked about this. I started to just tell you that, translating ideas into products is not an easy task. Many of you have had that experience. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of attention to the details. It requires a lot of knowledge of the workflows that you're going after, learning and experiencing the actual challenges that your customers are facing and your early adopters are facing, and then go through so many iterations before you can get it really in the hands of people in a more viable, sustainable way. We talked about the fact that software plays a big role in innovation almost everywhere. And one of the confusions I guess a lot of us have been maybe hearing and been facing is that how do we make a solid choice about the technologies that we want to build? Why is that important? Because when you go out and start really understanding how you want to build your technology, no matter what type of engineers, developers you're talking to, you are being briefed or told about many different ways of doing things. And so making the right choice or making some proper technology and architectural choices can be very complicated, because at the end of the day, it will impact the way that you're going to be scaling your technology from that point on. Developers are expensive. Yes, the salary ranges are now coming down because of the fact that AI is now disrupting them for the first time I guess, since the beginning of the dot-com boom. But that's probably going to change again because regardless of the fact that we are actually bringing in a lot of efficiency into the process of the software development lifecycle, we are going to be doing a lot more in terms of software. So the best example that I've heard from Mr. Bill Gates was about the fact that, when the tractors and the bulldozers came out, the farmers thought that they're going to go out of business because they were just, doing only the shovel. But just a few years later, the need of farming just grew so much, and we had so many more mouths to feed that they didn't go out of business, but they could always, and they are still, farming industry is still one of those areas that you still need a lot of resources and operators. Aligning founders, customers, early adopters, engineers, internal teams, marketing, sales is not an easy thing, especially for an early stage company. And that makes it even more complicated when you're starting off with an idea, with an entirely new idea and trying to bring it to the market. And at the end of the day, no matter how hard you work with your customers, with your technology, with your engineers, internally, you're pushing and you're hustling every day. At the end of the day, if you don't push your product into the market, nothing works out for you as a company. So how do you really go through this exercise of starting with a concept, with just an idea, and then you go through steps to build it, validate it, iterate on it, and put it in the hands of people, shortening that timeline, making it an augmented process makes a huge sense and it's important. With this slide, I just wanted to show you the significance of this revolution that's happening in the software. So the cost of bad software to the US economy alone, and I didn't have the Canadian numbers, is about $2.4 trillion a year. And that number came out in 2022. Based on the research, and you can find the sources of down below. And that grew from only 2 trillion, so kind of jumped by about 25% in only 2 years. And this is going to get a lot worse as we move forward. For the earlier stage founders, startups, the challenge is that good significant portion of whatever earlier stage capital you raise actually goes into technology development. And then you have to revamp it a few times, reiterate on it a few times before you can scale those technologies. So that's a lot of waste. Good 50% of all of the software projects actually end up in failure. There are so many underlying root causes of that. But the biggest and the most important one is the fact that 80% of all of the software projects are actually impacted by scope. And you may know this already. The moment you have the first prototype, the moment you have the first screenshot of your application, that's the first time you're actually experiencing this. So it's a massive problem. And then we think everything else you see on those slides, the 50% of all the software projects impacted by project management, cost overruns, late delivery, technical debt, and QA, we think a lot of it is actually related to the first item scope. Please. Basically, you think that this is the scope of work for you. And then you say, this is what I need. The first page, login page, these are the workflows. And then that scope starts to shift almost immediately after you have the first prototype or the UI wireframe. There are 3 main categories of AI in software development that we wanted to kind of present to you today. The first category are the assisted tools. Basically, Copilot, ChatGPT, Cursor, the LLM agents that tie into your IDE or software development platform. They act like the autocomplete type of things. So as you're typing your code, they kind of suggest the next let's call them syntaxes or lines of code or many lines of code, or they can just simply be used to explain and make sense out of the code that you're looking at on your screen. They are robust. You can even prompt them in English to say, this is the type of the code that I want you to build for me. And as they are, and they are all weaved into your workflow. So the moment you're typing code or the moment you prompt it, you're actually parsing your code onto the IDE or wherever you're putting your code. At the end of the day, they are built on the large language models. The large language models are designed to basically deal with any structured kind of text, whether it may be just simple English text, or in this case, programming languages. They can make sense out of that structure. And then obviously they can augment the software development piece. For some reason, okay, that's fine. We just wanted to give you a couple of very simple demos run by one of my colleagues, engineers, and part of our engineering team, Yusuf here amongst the audience. And we just wanted to show you things in action. And again, for coders, I'm sure you know probably most of this stuff that we're going to show you. But for the non-coders, for the founders, you can actually look at these things. And you can start understanding of how you can maybe encourage your developers to start using these tools and how to put them into good use for you and for your business. Back to you. So I'm going to stop sharing here. You said you can share.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Yusuf. I'm one of the developers here at Codalio. I haven't been developing for that long, but long enough to see this AI make a big disruption in our field, because even when I started coding, it was in 2018. It's not that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago because so much has changed in the past few years. And yeah, so we as developers have a really good opportunity here to accelerate how we code, because these AI tools, they give us a lot of opportunities. And I'm here today to show you some of the most basic stuff that you can do. So I have VS Code here set up. If you have a GitHub account, you can get a GitHub Copilots for free, basically, with some limitations. And that's what I have here right now for this demo. I'm just doing the using the free account, so there's nothing exclusive here. So if you don't know, you can click on the little icon down here on the bottom left. I'm already logged in, but it gives you a little option to say log in. You can log in with your GitHub, and then you have it. So here, what I want to do here is show you guys how you can use plain English to get to working code. No problem. Okay, so what I have here is, let's say I have the comments prepared here, but just for the sake of time. Let's say I don't know anything about coding. I don't know how to code at all. I just know I want to do something, right? So very simple thing is just an email validation. Almost every website you go now, there's a login. Email validation is the most basic thing you need to do in coding. So let's say I write my comments inside VS Code. This is a simple Python application that we have, right? And I have Copilot installed and activated, and I'm not even touching the keyboard. And already you can see there's a little grayed out import read, right? And this is doing that because of the comments that I've added, right? So I've added the comment that I want to create a Python function that is going to take an email address as a string, use regex, validate it, and then return true or false, right? So I'm just going to press tab throughout this process, basically not typing a single line of code, just pressing tab, and let's see what it does, right? And this is all based on the 3 lines of comments that I wrote. And I pressed tab like 4 or 5 times. Already we have something, right? So now let's see if it's going to work or not, right? So if I just go to generate and then run my file. Okay, good. we have an error. Good example. Good case for AI to help us debug, right? Let's say I don't know anything. I don't know what is happening, right? So what are we going to do? Right at the top right here, we have a little icon that's going to open up the Copilot interface. So a really quick way would be to give reference to Copilot for our terminal. So the way to do that, it would be with a little hashtag symbol, or actually, sorry, it's a @ and then I can say terminal, right? And then I can say something like, tell me what the issue is in my code. And I've given terminal as my reference, right?
Terminal is a window that you run the code.
Yeah, terminal is what is my console down here at the bottom of the screen. It's not quite sure how to do that. Okay, no problem. Let's try something else. Let's add the file. Right here, you can see you can give references other than terminal. You can give file references, right? So I've added this email validation.py, and I can say something like, this code does not run. Help me fix it. And it wants to run, what it wants to do right now in agents mode, right? It wants to run this file inside its own terminal so it can help me, right? So I'm just going to say allow. Let's see what happens. So you can see it's actually running it inside my terminal. And because it ran it in the terminal, it has access to it. The error is because you're running the command from the wrong directory. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. Let's see. So we
basically is guiding you where you're making mistakes.
Yeah.
Your code, and then it will eventually help you out to debug it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So here, let's run Python email one more time. We're in the same area, right? So let's see. I am in the correct directory now. What is the issue? I want to run this one more time. Okay, so the issue is a typo in your code. The demo email validation function, the name of the function is this, and here we have a error. So let's say I don't know how to do, I don't know what any of this means even, right? Please apply the fix form.
To propose the fix, and we're saying now do it for me instead of
right? So as you see here, it already made the correction. Now let's see if that actually fixed the problem. Run it one more time. There we go. Right? So this is the output I'm expecting. Obviously, this is an email validation system. So we have what we want, right? Without even knowing how to code at all, right? Plain English, you can go to code. This is just a simple example of how we can use, this is obviously very basic stuff, but you get the idea of it, and it goes beyond, right? So if any of the developers in the audience, if you guys are using Cursor, obviously Cursor gives you a ton more abilities. Now they've done this planning thing where you can actually ask the AI to come up with a full plan on how you want the AI or the system to implement whatever it is you want it to implement, and then it'll start implementing that plan, right? But Cursor is not free, so maybe we will move on from Cursor. But there's a couple of other things that I do want to share with you guys, and there are other tools here. Just give me a quick second. I do have a couple of other examples. We did debugging. I'm just going to go through debugging. I'm going to skip debugging because we just did this. It wasn't part of the plan for this to have a bug, but it did, and I just used this opportunity to show you guys how it works.
Let me explain something. One of the reasons that in the first attempt, you actually see the generated code was buggy is really because of the nature of the LLMs and the way that they can actually come to it. As the models are getting better and better, the generated codes is just also getting better, but it is unpredictable. So in one of our demos, we never had any bugs, but in this case, the first attempt came out with a buggy code.
Yeah.
So that's why, we're not exactly, scripted on these demos.
Yeah.
Because you never know what's going to happen. And even sometimes some of the prompts that you saw, the way that it behaves, reacts to the prompts is very different every time.
But the very good thing is that, as you see, like, even if you run into issues with it, you can still use the system, the LLMs, to guide you through it, right? And a very big thing for me, especially as like a real developer using, using these tools in our workflow, is to have it explain things to us, right? So let's say I'm looking at a code, somebody else wrote it, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it, right? So instead of spending 2-3 hours going through asking the developer, you just ask her, say, hey, can you explain to me what this piece of code does? And it's super helpful like that, right? So there are a lot of use cases for it. Auto completion, it's like auto complete on your phone, but like on boost, honestly, on turbocharged. Yeah, that's pretty. I do have a quick challenge for you guys. If anybody is interested to do a little challenge, if you guys have VS Code set up, I'll put it up on the screen for a quick second, and then you guys can decide if you want to participate. But basically, what we're asking is write a function that accepts a string as input and counts the characters in that string and outputs the number of characters.
Right up on the screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find. It's right here. I'm just trying to fix the formatting so it's like
So while you do
legible.
that, one of the things that I wanted to explain is that, as you could see here, these LLMs, the Copilot type of tools, they live inside the software development platforms and tools like the IDEs. So you need, at the end of the day, although even if you're not a developer, you need to have an understanding of how things actually tie together. So you do your code in IDE. You usually use Git repos, for example, to push your code on, for versioning, for maintaining the code in many different ways, collaboration capabilities, and so on. Again, as a developer, you know all of that. So you're only getting a lot of business support and performance in these types of tools. The second observation is that as these models are getting better and better, you may end up finding yourself in a situation that your programming language becomes simple English, because all your prompts are in English. And then once you explain the logic and the flow of how you want your code to behave, then you can obviously get your IDE to build those things for you. Just two main observations for you understanding. Please.
Yeah, so if you guys want to give it a shot, the challenge is basically to write a function that accepts a string as input, count the number of characters, and then output the count. So do it without Copilot if you know how to code. If you know any Python, try to do it without it. Or if you know the most basics, maybe you can give it a shot. And do it with Copilot. And then tell me what your observations. Which one is faster? Which one is easier? Which one works better? Even if you're not somebody who knows code, try to do it with Copilot if you want. And yeah, that's pretty much.
So the reason that we're suggesting that if you want to experiment things, if you have a computer in front of you, and if you want to just try things and ask us questions, you can do that. But then obviously you don't have to.
Yeah.
So we're here to answer any questions in relation to the most basic module of our presentation, but ask us anything that may be useful to you and to your business.
Yeah, and I'm going to be here until the end of the session, so feel free to ask me any questions. And I'm sure we're going to drop our Discord in the communication later, so you guys can join us on Discord as well. And I'm pretty much always there as well.
So even if you decide to do it later, you can always come back to us, reach out to us and say, these are the challenges we're having. Again, it does not have to be related to our business, but if you are trying things out and you need some guidance, you can obviously come to us and ask your questions. We do have a Discord channel that you can join, which we're going to share with you at the end of the presentation, and then you can obviously join the community on this with specific questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
So for those who may be interested to know, there are so many different LLM models that you can leverage for your coding. ChatGPT or the OpenAI core, obviously are known to a lot of us. Copilot is actually built on ChatGPT and OpenAI core technology. Since ChatGPT 5, they're actually doing some great work. Like the quality of the code that they're generating is a lot better. But if you really are just a coding enthusiast, you may want to also look at Claude from Anthropic. They have specialized on writing code, and so their model actually provides and creates the most accurate coding outcome and output. But again, different models are fine-tuned on different purposes. Maybe you find the new ChatGPT better than the Claude when it comes to the UI stuff. So try and find your best, I guess, assistant. And the Copilot engine also allows you to switch between many different models anyways. Windsurf is another one that you may want to take a look at. That one is an open source alternative to the Cursor. And you can also there choose a model that you want to use your coding with. And it can be really beneficial to a lot of things that you want to do. I think one of the interesting things in leveraging LLMs and the coding agents is to write also testing methods or testing code. Because if you tell it what you expect from your code as an outcome, as an acceptance criteria, you can actually get all those testing methods generated for you automatically. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump right into the module 2. And I think after this one, we're taking a short break. One of the very first steps, and Yusuf, you're going to help me out with the demonstration, so get ready for that. So one of the very first steps in the whole software development lifecycle is that a lot of people start drawing, as we call it, high fidelity prototypes or wireframes. There are so many different names for that these days. But you essentially start by just drawing the imagined user interface that you're hoping to be able to get your developers to build for you. This is a very important step. We are experiencing it on a daily basis on our own, even with our own development team, that you do need those things because you may be describing to someone that you need a login system. And obviously they go ahead with what they know best, but maybe the login system in your world has different workflow steps to get to the actual application after that. So you want to be very specific about things and the way that you're imagining your code, which means obviously you have to maybe talk to your audience, your ICP. Maybe you should ask, if you're building an application, let's say for a doctor, you want to know what sort of a user interface they're comfortable with. Are they okay to have many data sets and data points to be presented on one screen, but everything appears very small? Or they want to have large icons, large text to be able to navigate a lot faster on the screen. So this is where the conversation starts. And you essentially start off with just creating your prototypes. We will be showcasing a couple of different tools for you and for your understanding. And we want to show you how quickly these days we can move on to building prototypes just with simple idea or simple small prompts to these tools. So traditionally, there has been tools like USArt or Figma or the others that basically you start drawing your user interface and your wireframes, whether it may be using a drag and drop kind of an experience, or just using your mouse or different types of inputs to start drawing your user interfaces. But now, in this time and day, you can use other tools like the new ones, the novel one, the Go, that you can essentially either speak to, say, this is what I want, which will be transcribed and then fed into those types of tools, or you can just simply type. Why is it different? Why is it a preferred method these days? And why is it the case that a lot of people actually find this maybe easier for them? Because you can actually convey a lot with just the text rather than trying to drag and drop every single box and drawing things and adjusting things and saying, now I need the space between this and that. Like, you know, maybe the visuals on the splash screen should have maybe a space between that part and then another sections. So instead of trying to kind of draw those things manually and go through the steps, you can just simply prompt and say, this is the type of page that I need. And the LLMs being trained on obviously other examples, other codes that they have seen, they essentially produce something that is very close to what people are actually used to. So when you say I need a page, let's say for a marketplace, they have all the data from all of the websites and all the code that they can find on. And by knowing that, they don't have to kind of manually or in a way start building with no benchmark, with no base. They start with those examples and they mimic those examples and they actually create something that is a lot more compelling than you starting to drag and drop these boxes. So we're going to show you, again, a few examples. And interestingly enough, all of these tools are also adding the AI engine. So yes, you can, for example, generate things a lot faster than the prompt. But what if you also could edit and move things around on your own? Because the moment you have the first prototype, instructing to say, you know what, maybe move that button 10 pixels on the left and right is a lot more complicated writing it than just, you know, now after the first iteration, just, you know, use your mouse and then move things around. So people are just kind of trying to leverage AI in many different ways. And we just wanted to show you some of those examples. So in your next maybe project, you can experience those things and move things a lot faster. So Figma is a good example. Figma has been around. A lot of you may have heard of them for a very long time. You can visualize all of the user interface that you have in mind and user experiences in the way that you want the flows to happen. But now they're using AI in a different way. They are using AI to convert that UI drag and drop built interface into code. So when we say AI, you can actually use it in many different ways. And a lot of these was actually finding those ways to do those things. So we're going to show you a couple of different examples. UAZard, again, sketch in digital in seconds as a slogan. You can text, you can create a text, you can put a prompt to create your UIs in the wireframes. You can even upload your wireframe. So again, UAZard has been around for some time again as well. You can text, you can put your prompt in English and you can generate the application or the user interface of the application. You can actually even upload your hand-drawn user interface and get it digitized. And then from there, you can also, you know, use images, and then it will do the magic for you in many different ways. It will make it look a lot better. It will give you the drag and drop experience afterwards, and it will give you some code if you want to. Lovable and Devil, we talked about them earlier. They've done an amazing job at converting prompts into user interfaces, but they don't stop there, which I'm going to get to. But again, Figma, I told you about, has existed for some time. Now they're leveraging AI to convert the visuals into code. What's interesting with the Bolt and the Lovable, which never existed before, is that when you convert your user interface into code, you have to be able to run it in a way that it actually renders in your browser or in development environments. They make that part very easy for you as well. Which means once you prompt to generate your user interface or prototype code, they can actually on the spot preview it without you having to set up your, environment to actually render them and show them. The people that actually are in software development at any capacity would realize this better than most of us. But sometimes making sure that you have all the libraries of JavaScripts running in your environment, the development environment is not that easy. It can take a very long time. Moving from one tech stack to the other one is even more complicated in that process, because then you have to worry about all the dependencies, all of the other libraries that you have to build. And then also afterwards, you have to obviously preview it in your browsers. So they've made the magic they have is simply because of the fact that not only they can generate the UI code with prompts, but they can also render it and preview it for you. Now they're diving into deployments, which basically means they're pushing it into your own cloud environment to run that code. But you know, at the end of the day, they are mostly focused and geared towards generating your user interfaces and user experiences, which means they don't give you much of an actual backend functions. You can connect to a database, you can connect to a maybe to an authentication system, as we call it. But if you have a more complex application, you would find it very difficult to use those platforms. You have to generate code, unplug that code, put it into your Git repo, whatever repository of the code, and then continue your work to build the backend. But they actually do a pretty good job in terms of quick prototyping, reiterating, improving on, and then obviously running it and showing it. And you can essentially, after a few iterations, you can get your user interface and user experience. So now I'm going to pass it again to over here, you said.
Thank you.
To show us a match.
Yeah, so
we're going to
share my screen. Yeah, let's start with that. I can start in the meantime.
Please.
Yeah, so I didn't know the value of UI prototyping until I joined the real software company. I was one of the people who thought, oh, what's the big deal? Like, I just want to start coding right away. But no, it actually, UI prototyping is honestly probably one of the most important steps into developing any kind of product you want to do. And the main reason I would say is because of communication, right? Because it just makes communication a whole lot easier. So in our own team, sometimes I have to talk with you know, the front-end developer, and he'll start saying, oh, I want to do this and do that, and I'll just be like, can you give me a wireframe? Because it just makes it a lot easier, right? And traditionally, making wireframes was a little bit more time consuming, let's say, especially for somebody like me who doesn't have any artistic capacity at all, right? So you'd go on Draw.io, like Ehsan was saying, drag a box here, do this, do that, get frustrated. But now we have all these AI tools that just makes this process a whole lot easier, right? So I have UIZart here. I have set up an account. It's a free account. There's nothing special going on here. I just want to walk you guys through how to get from a simple prompt to a working product or a working UI prototype. So first thing, start a new project. Let's say I want to work on a mobile design this time. We'll wait for it to load up. So here we are, right at the very bottom. If you guys can see, it's a little dark. I apologize for that. But you guys can see the little chat box here. So I have a prompt already, but we have to go through a few steps first, right? So what do we want to do? We want to generate a new screen. That's the first thing. How do we want to do it? We can upload a picture. We can upload a wireframe. This time, I'm just going to type in a description. And now I have to decide what platform I want to do it for. So let's go with mobile. Okay, so here we are in this screen, and I have a prompt already copy and pasted. This is the simple bus tracking.
You want to read that out loud so people can read it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the prompt says create a modern bus tracking system app with real-time bus location tracking, search and filter for routes and stops, user profiles with saved routes, notifications, ticket booking, delay alerts, and an admin dashboard and fleet manager and analytics. So this is the prompt that we got. Let's start with this, right? So it's just going to spin up its own thing. It's asking me what kind of definition I want. So let's go with high precision. And it's just going to take a few moments to design. And you can actually see the design happening in real time. right? And this is generating the entire app based on just a few lines that I told it, right? So let's say UI. Sorry, what did I say? Yeah, the UI of the app, right? So there you go, quickly, easy, right? You have an idea in your head, you want to put it down. You're like me, you don't know how to do any of the, honestly, I can't, I can never make anything like this. So I'm very grateful for tools like this. As a developer, it's a big time help, right? So another, I just wanted to also mention, so something like UIZard, it has a lot of different features that you guys can use. I just showcased one of them, which is just prompt English to UI. But you can also upload a screenshot. You can draw or upload a wireframe. You can also view the wireframe of the design that you just got from the system. So you can also export it, right? So there is a little handoff button right here on the right side. And if I select this item, it lets me select the whole thing, the bus tracking system. Okay, well, all right. So basically what I'm trying to show you guys is that you can export your files into different formats as well. So PNG, JPEG, SVG, all the typical ones. So in the upgraded version, it would actually give you the React code for these components as well. But we'll just skip over that for now. Another great tool that is a very big help is Figma. As Ehsan mentioned, Figma has been around for, I don't know how long, but it's probably the most popular UI design tool that a lot of developers use. So nowadays, Figma has incorporated AI plugins. So there's a lot of plugins. They're kind of like, if you know extensions on VS Code, where anybody can make an extension for it. Nowadays, anybody can make an extension for Figma. And there is a lot of them that are free on their marketplace. And so I have another one that is similar to what we just did on UIZard, which is text to design, right? So this is a little extension. I have a little basic plain Figma. This is their template that loads up with the app, right? So I'm just going to paste the exact same prompt in it. This is the same modern bus tracking system, right? And let's see what this one does, right? So I'm just trying to show the different tools that are available now, right? And once we have this one, we'll go over to Lovable and Bolt as well. But each of these platforms, they have their own use cases, right? So UIZard is really fast, it's really quick, it's lightweight, it's easy to learn, it's more user-friendly, I would say, as compared to something like Figma, where you need to be a little bit more proficient with it, and it's a little bit more complicated. Maybe it's a little more overwhelming to start. But here we go. These extensions are just making your life a lot easier, right? So I put in my prompts into this extension. It generated something. Let's see. Export it as a frame. And here we are. So I was going to...
Let's just pause for it. What you can see here is that the outcome and the output from the UIZard is very different than what you see on Figma. Again, this goes back to the same conversation we have, that each and every model produces different results. And so it's very obvious that UIZard has nailed the whole process in a way to convert the prompts into actual good designs. And so that also tells you that not one single platform or tool can actually give it. Yeah, you have to try it out. You have to know exactly what you're trying to do, and you have to pick the one that actually works for your use case.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the use cases, like you said, that's the main point. Yeah, so something like this, you know, like if you're in Figma or even UIZard, obviously these give you the tools to, you know, actually make edits, make real edits, you know, as you wish. So if you don't like something, obviously you can go back to the tools, or you can start. What I usually do is I just get the initial, you know, infrastructure, or like the skeleton in, and then I just kind of do my own thing on top of it, right? So very, very boost the productivity here. Just very quickly, I also want to show you guys Lovable. So this is an example of the exact same prompts that I put in Lovable. I just ran this while I was sitting down because this usually takes a few minutes, so I didn't want to take too much time. But as you can see, so Lovable is designed to give you something that is a little bit more polished, let's say, or more extensive. You know, it's supposed to be the full app or full experience. But again, like Ehsan was mentioning, a lot of this is just to give you a prototype, like maybe something to, so you know, you want to convey some messages or your ideas, because a lot of these tools, they're not functional, right? So sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Like Ehsan's been saying throughout this whole session, you know, it's a hit or miss. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? The way you want it to. But the most important thing here for this is to get to this point in a matter of few minutes, right? These tools are available. And the next thing, the last thing I want to go over is Bolt. Again, same prompt, same exact. So everything you guys have seen so far, it's been the same prompts, right? We went through UiZart, Figma, Bolt, Lovable, and we saw 4 different designs. All of them are just doing completely different things. This one, maybe a little bit more functional in terms of like at least the buttons work. But again, it's a good starting point, right? Good foundation. You have an idea in your head quickly, you just want to put it down, show it to your investors, whoever it may be. These tools are out here now, and honestly, it's made my life as a developer a whole lot easier.
Cool. It's just, I want to just go a little bit deeper into this conversation. So the UiZart use the AI to translate your prompts into a visual user interface. Figma, same. There's another step that comes after that converts your final UI into an actual software code, where you have to then load it in your own development environment and then get it to run. And the difference between them and the Lovable and the Bolt is that they start from prompt, and from there, they actually directly generate the code that is then rendered in the browser on here to show you the actual design. So it's very different the way that they function, but they produce similar experience, which is, in our world, prototyping ideas. And as Yusuf mentioned, there's not much of a functionality. They hard code some of the functions, so when you click, you think things are actually running. But obviously, they're not going to stop there. They are going now to add more layers of functionalities into the backend. And obviously, they generate a good amount of backends, probably in a few months, if not already. If I wanted to give you sort of a high-level scale, these numbers, don't quote me on them. They're not 100% accurate, but they give you sort of a ballpark. So the Copilot and the ChatGPT and the ones that were doing the code generation, they probably can give you an uplift of about, maybe you can do this, say this better, 20 to 40% of your entire ultimate code that you need. The prototyping tools can give you good 70, 80% of the front end, but really not that much of a back end, maybe 5% today. And so that's why when we are categorizing these things, we're not calling them engines to build MVPs. MVP stands for minimal viable product. So it's a viable, functional product that you can actually put in front of your early adopters and get them to use it and then provide feedback. So it has to be functional, it has to run. And if your early adopters, the number and the size grow, you should not be worried about adding 200 other servers to be able to provide this thing. You should be able to, as you go, scale it in a meaningful and reasonable way that you're not breaking the bank and you're not maybe consuming all of your AWS or GCP. Great question. So I think there are a few things that I want to mention to you. First of all, what is your value proposition? You start with that. And then you focus on that. You try to crystallize that value as much as possible. Everything that is not part of your value proposition should not worry you that much. Because to be honest, if you have a simple login system, if that works, great. But people are not going to pay you extra to have a single sign-on.
Yeah.
When you are a startup, they are going to pay you for your value proposition. So when you ask me if you need to worry about these things, my answer to you is that you know whom you're going after, your ICP, and try to interview a few early adopters to say, do you see the value of what I'm showing to you on the screen? And again, collect as much as feedback, have a good sized data sets so you can react to say that, for example, this client said, if your workflow works in such a way or that way, then they're actually going to be adopting my platform better or faster, and they will be able to pay. So in our world, the minimal viable product should be defined in a way that has a lot of basic stuff around it, but has a lot of focus on the value proposition. Is that feedback for the early adopters to kind of tell you about how I would just integrate with already existing tools. I wouldn't build something that already exists. Yeah. Maybe there are some tools that you can integrate that would pop up and ask the right question at the right place. There are platforms like PostHop, for example, that your developers would know about, that kind of gives you a thorough overview, detailed analysis of how the users are actually behaving inside your platform. It will even generate videos, screenshots of how people are actually moving their mouse on the screen. Why is that important? Because you want to make sure that people from one page to the other are not moving the mouse from one corner to the other, and they're not finding the options on the screen. So there are those types of tools that you should not be building, but you should be integrating into your image. And one of our audience here, my good friend Nimo, he educated me on this just a few days ago, that you really have to pay attention to what the customer is at the end of the day telling you in that case. So just be creative. Maybe just bring some of those your ICPs, your early adopters into video calls, and get them to use your system as you're watching and as you're helping them out. Because I would imagine that the first few people need to not only you want to learn from them, but they may need some of your hand-holding, because at the end of the day, you may not want to automate everything from the day first. Maybe good 50% is good enough. So you can walk them through that exercise, that experience, to make sure that you're understanding what direction they want. So
So I just created my MVP about a month ago, and I've been getting users to test it out. So every time I get a lot of good feedback, I decided that I want to change up my code base a little bit, make it more user accessible. My issue has been every time I use AI to help develop part of my project, when I have to go change it, it becomes very complicated. Say, for example, when I was first prototyping, I was using local everything locally on my computer. But now when I integrated a database and a server, the AI doesn't seem to understand that I've changed a lot of things after the fact, right? So, is there a way to fix this problem?
So I guess the question to you is, what are you using? Are you using Cursor, for example?
Yes, and Copilot.
Copilot.
Yeah.
So if I may, let me just first explain what you just told me for the audience, and then I'll respond to it. So I think what you're saying is that you started off with some coding with your VS Code and React. And then you ship something to your customers, feedback's coming back. and you want to reflect upon them, you want to continue building new code on top of the code that you are finally building. The answer to that is that there is something as we call the context. So which is all of the prompts and all of the code and all of your business logic consideration that is fed to the AI to generate the code. Cursor has figured that out better than everyone else. So what they do is that once you plug in your Git repo, you can actually start adding some text documents that actually describes the whole architecture, describes some of the examples in ways that you use that architecture in your code, describes the user flows, and already the context of the existing code is already as part of the practice. So when you prompt it, it actually builds on those previously created and maintained context. Otherwise, every time you're prompting, you have to give it the entire context from the previous iterations. Okay. So you brought up an excellent comment into this whole, setting me up for the next module, which is something. Please.
Yeah, sorry if I may add to this. So I can relate to what you're saying because we deal with that all the time too. So I found in my experience the best way is to document the code, right? Because if you think about it, traditionally, what was code documentation used for? It's for other developers, right? To get the context. So let's say I wrote a module, I wrote some, 10,000 lines of code. The only person who knows what that 10,000 lines of code does is me, right? Because it's all in my head. But we document it, whether it's separate as like a little MD file where you just explain what that module is, or you put, in code comments explaining what everything is. This not only helps myself to remember what I've done, right? But it also helps the AI to get the context, right? Because sometimes I'll leave comments like this is related to that other thing that is somewhere else. And when AI sees those comments, they'll actually go to those other places and check those as well. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the IDEs need to really know where to look for the documentation. So Cursor has done an amazing job. I think Copilot is also starting adopting the same method, but you got to do that. But one of the things that we're actually doing in Codalio workflow is exactly what you just described. So we always, at the very beginning of the project, we created thorough blueprints, scope of work of the entire project. We update that first. Then we get into coding because then we use that context in conjunction. Everything else that we added back there to feed it into as a context. Like a brain that kind of maintains the whole knowledge of the code. And it's very similar to the whole experience of the singing, because like no matter what type of engineering and development team you find, there's always one person that knows almost everything. You don't need that. You can actually make sure that as you're generating the code, you're also getting AI to generate the documentation as well. And then with that blueprint being accumulated over time and properly feeding it back to the AI engines, then you get that full experience. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Question?
There's one question.
There is an online question I'm trying to answer. They're asking where they can find list of tools you can use to track users, customers on your product platform to help elicit feedback. So Post-Hog is one of them you mentioned. I was just going to look for a few.
Oh, yes, the Post-Hog is an absolutely great tool that you can plug in to make sure that you kind of observe the user behavior. I think Intercom is another one that you can also use and do API integration. First one is Post-Hog. Post HUG. So
HOG.
OG. Sorry.
Yeah. What was the second one you said?
Intercom.
Intercom.
And then there are other tools. I don't remember the specific names. We use these ones.
Mixed panel, amplitude.
Amplitude is a good one. And the Hotjar is another one, which kind of looks at the interactions with the user interface. But you can also, when you use tools like Intercom or other ones, you can actually pick them at the very beginning of your development lifecycle, and you can actually make sure that the most important function calls are properly tracked. Because sometimes you want to know how many people are actually, for example, using the export option on the user interface, which you can actually collect it as you go. But again, we live in the AI world. Just ask the same question from the Copilot, and it will actually give you some really good feedback.
Don't tell them. That's what I just.
Sometimes AI tools can write way better prompts. Sorry, yeah. So let's say we are studying with the prompt. If we ask,
Oh yes, we will generate. That's a great problem. So yes, so we sometimes write a prompt to generate something or generate something, and it doesn't produce what we want. So instead of trying to fixing the output, you can actually take that prompt, feed it back, and say, I have this prompt, but I was expecting this to happen, but it didn't. When you improve my prompt, does wonders. We're doing it on a daily basis. I think we can take a longer break.
We can take a break.
Okay, we're gonna come back here at 6. Okay. Thank you. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, please put them on the chat. And again, at the end of the presentation, we're gonna give you a link where you can download all of the materials that we're presenting here, along with some of the best practices in or checklists in building MVPs. You're going to have our contacts. You're going to be able to join our Discord at obviously no cost, and you can always use us to ask your questions about how to build your MVPs better. Start from scoping, collecting user feedback, reiterating on those, and just going through the entire software lifecycle in a more, I guess, a comprehensive way.
Okay, everybody, thanks for sticking around for through the break and to hear my part of the presentation here. I just want to start to give you an idea of where I'm coming from here. I have a lot to tell you about my perspectives on AI in the industry. I've had a company in software services since 2009 up in Sudbury, Ontario. We do software services across the board, everything from embedded applications to desktop to web and mobile, and we're in lots of industries. We're in mining, engineering, medical, agriculture, scientific, and we've done some business side apps like workforce management and things like that. So I'd say probably 30 to 40 projects under our belt at this point. I was born in Sudbury, and I actually went away to do a degree in math at the time, which it was actually computer science, but back then it was a math degree, so I'm kind of aging myself. And I also did a minor in bioinformatics, which is kind of like the computing behind genetics and proteins and things like that. My first work experience as a software developer was in Silicon Valley, right during the famous dot-com bubble. So I was there in the early 2000s. Actually reminds me a lot about what's happening now. There's just so many parallels to the industry. So it's kind of interesting that way. I ended up going back to Sudbury. That's where I wanted to live. And at that point, I did a master's in mining engineering and took a job for a little bit. That's when I decided that I want to start a software company. And at that time, focused on mining projects mostly, being up in Sudbury. If you're not familiar with Sudbury, it's a heavy with mining industry. So that's kind of my work experience. So I wanted to know, I didn't get a chance to talk to everybody when we first arrived, but I know there's a couple of business owners and a couple of ventures starting up, but I'm curious, like how many software developers, how many coders are in the audience? Right, that's a good number. Sorry for the people online. It's a bit harder to do a quick survey. I'll just assume it's kind of the same proportions. Are there any students here? And then how many? We're all always learning, right, in this industry. I was gonna ask as well, how many people are starting a business or are already in a business? Okay, I think there's more of you. All right, so I wanted to say that the perspectives I'm offering tonight come from my history as a business owner and how the field has evolved, especially lately, obviously. But one kind of key theme through what I want to tell you is kind of I've learned how important the software development team is to any startup. And sometimes we're isolated as developers, our heads are down, we're coding, and we don't have all of the exposure to the upper management and whatever. But there's so much of what we do that is just critical. Like there's investment on the line, reputations are on the line, and a lot of this depends on how a project progresses and whether or not it's ultimately successful. And a lot of that advice comes from the software development team, and obviously how the project progresses depends on the performance of the software development team. So just keep that. I try to keep that in mind as I'm talking in this space, because how these tools change our jobs ultimately affects outcomes and investments and reputations. I'm ultra modern here with my printed notes. Okay, so needless to say, and I think you guys touched on this, but the planning steps, in the journey from an idea to an MVP, the planning steps are the first thing that comes up. Super critical. Getting this right at the beginning is obviously when time and money are of the essence. Knowing what you want to build and how long it's going to take are key things you need to get right at the beginning. We talked about scope creep earlier, but that's just like industry standard at this point. Everyone kind of thinks they know what they want, and then when you show them, it suddenly changes pretty quick. So for a lot of reasons, reaching MVP is on time and on budget is a lot harder than it sounds on paper. There's also other problems such as discoveries.
No problem.
Well, folks, everybody, we screwed up on his slides. So I just got the note from the team that they fixed it. So
Awesome.
While you continue,
Okay.
I'll just put it back on my screen.
Yeah, I said, I noticed that when I came up here, it's not going to match what I'm saying, but hopefully you're listening to me anyway and not reading the slides. Let's look at it that way. So, other things happen besides scope creep. Obviously, there's new discoveries. Sometimes things can be harder than you thought, especially if you're working with like hardware or other components. It's not always smooth sailing. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're starting up, and that your estimates, although you may have a perfect plan, may not always be totally accurate.
All yours.
Perfect, thanks. Okay. Despite all this though, and despite having a good team, you may run into challenges, but the point is that if you started off with as good of a plan and estimate as you can, and best understanding as possible, your probabilities go way up. And what was the quote earlier, but trillions of dollars in cost and 50% failure rates and things like that with software projects. So that was my introduction, just to give you an idea where I'm coming from, where my experience is, how I got into this world of software development. And I want to talk about 3 topics with you today from that perspective. So a real practical perspective of delivering software projects for 16 years. So the first thing is I want to give you a background of how a typical MVP will get developed. So how a new venture may take an idea all the way to MVP. And the nature of my company is I've worked with a lot of startups and a lot of small businesses through this journey. So I'm quite familiar with it. The second topic I wanted to talk about was the impact of AI tools, which is why we're all here tonight. So I want to talk about how things have kind of evolved in the past couple of years for me. The third thing is I came up with a hypothetical scenario. So just really concrete example of, hey, here's a new startup. This is how it used to go, and this is how we approach it in recent months. I should say recent days, because it has changed again. It's evolving very quickly, so I want to kind of be as up to date as possible with how we would deliver an MVP at this point in time. And then at the end, if there's any questions, but feel free if you want to interrupt me in the middle of it, anytime. So topic number one, how does the MVP journey begin? It usually starts with a lot of key requirements, key ingredients, a good idea, a good team, time and money, and the most important thing is ambition. It really takes somebody with a lot of ambition to kick off a new project and bring it to fruition. But one thing's for sure, like no two are the same. It's always a different journey, depending on what you're doing and the technology of the day and whatnot. But the commonalities between these projects is what I want to base my discussion on. For sure, like every project is going to have a lot of meeting and communication time. Often my clients, know what they want, they know what the goal is, but have no idea how to do it. Other times they know how to do it, but don't necessarily have their scope down pat. So there's quite a wide range, but communication is obviously key in the early stages. Documentation is another one. Having things well documented is usually quite critical to get everyone on the same understanding and on the same page. And all of this stuff, the reason I'm bringing it up is because it takes time. Like you might not realize it, but even a 1 hour meeting, like that could delay things a week or two before schedules align. So if something's waiting on a meeting, you could easily delay it by 2 weeks because of schedules. So keep that in mind. Time and money are always of the essence. That's another real commonality. The longer you're employing people, the longer things take, the more money it's going to cost. And budgets are super critical when you're in a startup. And the investors are obviously really interested in that part of it as well. So it's super important to optimize all of this, to be a lean startup, make the most of the resources you have, and make sure you make the most use of it in both your planning and your execution. So that's the birth of a new project. Proposal and planning. This is where it all begins. This is where usually I get involved. But what you usually end up needing is a really solid technical plan and a solid proposal. And the reason for that is, like, every investor is going to want to see that. If you're applying for funding, that's super critical as well. The third part of that is just getting everybody on the same understanding. So in these stages, those are your priorities. Now, like I mentioned, I've done projects across many industries, and it really is amazing how much you might misunderstand each other and not realize it. So documentation kind of helps with that. Mock-ups help with that, and so on. I'm sure you're familiar with all this, but it really has surprised me a number of times how after the fact, and we're starting to show mock-ups or starting to show demos, how we start catching the things we didn't understand each other on. And it's the things that you took for granted at the beginning. So I just want to bring that up because it certainly applies to what the other topics I'm going to cover here. A pitch deck is another one that you're going to spend a lot of time on because, like I said, everyone wants to see what your business plan is, but in a kind of a condensed format in a pitch deck. So these are the things that all go into the planning stages. And finally, first plan, then execute, and then replan. So when you start building it, again, time and money, right, is always kind of a big consideration as a startup. So the tools have always evolved, and you might have heard that when people are talking about AI is going to change things, how we've always had new tools. There's the farming example, and there's a million examples in the past 20 years in software development. Like I remember going to my OpenGL programming guide, like it was a physical red book that I had to have on my desk. Like no one would dream of having a textbook to refer to these days. But when we started getting more high-speed internet with more content and Google would help us find things, and then Stack Overflow and whatever else. It's always evolved, but with execution, it's super important to be up to date with the tools of the trade and understand the set of tools that you have at your disposal and how to use them. So as we start the development, some expectations from the development team is, as I mentioned, continuous learning, writing good code, staying on task, communication, solving problems continuously, but the main thing is delivering what is promised. And at that point, hopefully you get to your successful delivery of an MVP. So that's how it normally goes. I'm going to move on to topic 2 because this is the main reason we're here tonight, is how does AI change all of this? So everything I've said up till now is just to kind of frame, to give you a perspective, because what's important here is how things are changing so rapidly and which parts of the MVP journey are being affected. And it started 2-3 years ago, but it's just been exponential to the point where there's like new things every month or every week, it feels like. So it's definitely transforming the industry, and it's definitely transforming my business. We are super diligent on keeping up with how things are changing, and our clients expect us to do this. That's what we're paying. That's what they're paying for. We're supposed to be the experts. So it's really changed how quickly we have to learn and how often we have to learn. So I'm breaking this down into 5 areas of AI applications. The first one is scoping the project. I already told you about the challenges with scoping a new project, getting to know the team, communication, delays in communication, misunderstandings. And I brought all of that up because it's not immediately obvious how much the new tools help with this. And I guess the first example I want to give is getting on the same page, asking the right questions. Because what we've realized is even when we're starting in the early stages of planning, the AI tools that we use really, because it's based on kind of such a vast collection of knowledge, it really forces us to ask all the right questions and cover all the right topics. So it's a very good sanity check for when you're getting started on a project to make sure that you're covering things, like things you didn't think of. Catching logical problems, like if you're explaining and prompting AI, it may catch mistakes that you're making in your reasoning. It can facilitate communication. Like a really good example is doing those mock-ups. At the end of a meeting, you may have to say, I'll get back to you next week and we'll do some mock-ups and we'll review the mock-ups today. Why don't I just make a mock-up right in front of you and we'll discuss it right now? So it's totally different game. So lots of time savings, lots of money savings, and less waiting for meetings. You can get more done quicker. And the main thing there is when you save that time, it allows you to spend more time on the more important things that aren't as redundant and the finer details that normally you don't have time to really dig into. Second area is documentation. This one's a bit obvious, obviously ChatGPT and all the tools that are out there kind of speed up the rate at which you can develop your documentation. So again, that time and cost savings just allows you to focus on more important details. It reduces your frustration, and it allows you to develop documentation in a faster turnaround time to speed up how quickly you can get back to your clients. Third area was estimate and schedule. Sorry about that. There's the slide. The accuracy of the estimate and schedule, I brought that up earlier because that is always what's going to come back to bite you later in the project. There's going to be other reasons why that changes, but if you didn't have it right, especially as a services company, if I get that wrong, It's a very awkward conversation to have after, and sometimes there's no changing the budget. Like the budget has been set. You're not creating more money halfway through the project. So the AI benefits in this part are just super critical for my business and for anybody starting a business. It should be critical to you as well, because I'm sure time and money are of the essence for you as well. So where this is really helping us is getting those initial estimates. It forces you to think about all the details, and that's the worst part about estimating historically, is you tend to miss the more irrelevant parts of what you have to do, and you kind of only think about the main components of a project, and you forget about the less relevant stuff, like a login system or whatever it might be, or can you print a document? Can you export a PDF? Like, is your website accessible? Does it follow the accessibility guidelines? Penetration testing, did you put that into your budget? Like, there's a million things. So AI has been super helpful because it highlights all of this stuff that you didn't think of. And you get that right in the first 10 minutes instead of 5 weeks down the road when you thought about it too late. Area number 4 is the actual software development. We saw some tools tonight. And I mean, there's so many out there now, but the point behind this is, the practice of software development has just changed so much, and it's changing every day, it feels like. So we have all those tools that we talked about earlier, from a coding assistant to like an agent that actually is in your IDE writing the code for you, or to an online platform that just completely builds your product and deploys it online for you. There's really a wide range of the tools that we draw from, but I find what it has changed for us in our projects is that we have to spend a little bit more time learning and understanding the tools. But when we do use the tools, it really lets us focus on the more important parts of our job at this point. So we're doing less redundant things like building login systems and looking at, exporting documents and things like that. Scaffolding is another one, like just scaffolding up a new app, might waste a day or two getting that sorted, where now it's almost instant. So as a developer, we're learning more, learning faster, but we're also just focusing on the real important parts of building a product. And sometimes it's hard to visualize, but some of these products are industrial in my case, or enterprise level. There's a lot of complicated logic happening, and you really have to make sure it delivers what you're promising, and it doesn't have bugs, and it solves the problem that you're trying to solve. So now I'm focusing on that, and not like, looking up an algorithm or writing code from scratch to do like a best fit circle algorithm or things like that. All of that redundant stuff is instant mostly, and I can focus on the bigger picture. And then finally, debugging as well. It's the tools we're using are just really accelerating how quickly we can find problems. And finally, the fifth area where we're finding is also another critical component here, is the business case development. And I know doesn't apply so much tonight if we're a good group of software developers, but for the business owners, the business case is obviously key. So getting those numbers right and doing your market research, developing the documentation, identifying competitors that you may not know you had, or IP conflicts that you didn't know you had, getting idea of price and market share and things like that. These tools have just really transformed that process. So writing a business plan is just so much easier and faster. Of course, you want to fact check everything, but it's just, if you've ever written a business plan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone wants one. You have to have one, and it's no fun. So that's my perspective. Those are the 5 areas that this has changed my world. But what I really wanted to do tonight is give you an example of a practical example of let's call it a real product. It's definitely hypothetical, but I just came up with an idea that we can kind of look at and kind of go through the actual application of AI in this example. So how many of you are dog lovers in this traffic? And less hands probably, cat lovers, cat people. Okay, have you ever tried herding cats? Okay, that's what my idea is based on. This comes from me, probably more just a pet peeve of mine, but whenever I'm traveling with a group of people or at an event or whatever it might be, trying to get everyone to like agree on the same things, it usually interferes with actually enjoying the event. So I called this app Cat Flock. The idea is to be a flock of people and kind of, instead of trying to herd cats, this app is supposed to help you collaborate. So sorry, just a quirky introduction to my idea there, but let's all get on the same page. So pretend this is a new venture. I'm a client of KeyLogic, and I've presented this idea for an app that I want to develop. So traditionally, I already told you what that looks like, right? It's, you know, meetings, deciding on the feature priorities, on the priority features, sorry, laying out requirements, you know, making sure this makes sense, coming up with a budget, scaffolding an app, setting up my DevOps, and setting up a CI/CD, actually developing the app and testing, making sure there's no bugs, having the scope change a million times, and is it even a good business case? Like, you know, is the marketing good? Do people actually like cats? Is that going to like cut off half the market? There's a million things to consider the traditional way. So how would I do that today versus last week or 2 years ago? So let's go back to the areas. The planning and the execution. I brought this up because I can't really overstate how important that part of it is. And this is actually where I got involved with Codalio, for these reasons. And you know, I was starting to build the tool sets of my own for these reasons. But what I did for this example, and you can actually see this is real. There's a screenshot. Okay, the tablet's not real, that's Photoshop, but the content on that slide is actually me using Codalio to start this project. And I just want to go over where this tool helped me, because that's what that's the actual tool I use in this case. And I'm not going to be super nice because they're in the room. I'm being very genuine here. I was actually really surprised, and I alluded to this earlier, but the AI tools give you so many benefits at this stage in ways you wouldn't expect. Number one is, you know, it built a whole business plan, first of all, which saves a ton of time. But the content in that business plan also brought up things that I didn't think of. And I mentioned it earlier, the accessibility guidelines, things like that you normally wouldn't think of until it's too late. There was also some features. It asked me, hey, this looks like a good candidate for group chat. Would you want that feature? That probably would have come up 6 weeks from now. I'm glad it came up now. So it asked me a series of questions. It also has a nice scoring mechanism on the left. You can see those purple and green areas. So it kind of gives you an idea of the progress you're making and where it's still weak, and it builds up those numbers. One really interesting thing it did was it caught something really early that really would have hurt later on. So let me get into the app itself. It's a map-based tool that lets you get together with your friends, share a link, kind of like a OneDrive link, and you kind of all got a map of the area, and it lets you it shows you what's in the area, but it also lets you pin what you're doing and you know, the various things that you're going to attend that day. But there's an AI agent in the app that follows your chat and your group size and the time of day and where you are and what's going on. And it makes recommendations, like a restaurant you might want to go to have lunch at, for example. And the monetization of this is that what I was telling the AI agent is that you could pay for ads, and your service would appear in this AI recommendation. But I also said that it's unbiased, so it shows you things to do in the area. And I didn't catch that there's a logical conflict there, because you can't prioritize paying advertisers and at the same time show unbiased recommendations. And it kept asking me like a couple of times. If I showed you the chat history, I showed this on there, and it asked me a bunch of times, and I was wondering why, and I clued in. So as soon as I reframe that as the recommendations are unbiased, but if you're a paid advertiser, you procure the content. So if a certain restaurant comes up, it happens to be a paid advertiser, it's branded with their color and icon and whatever it might be, but it's procured maybe slightly larger. Otherwise, it's more plain text. Sorry.
How do you
So you can see the agent there. So the question was how does it ask questions? How does it?
Anyone's asking about
Oh, with ChatGPT, it's
not chat.
this is Codalio,
This is
and yeah.
Okay.
So, but I will say this: their AI agent is similar in nature. It's conversational, and so it asks you, and I can't ask the details of how it works, but it feels like it is looking at the parts that are missing. It kind of feels very natural that way. It's asking for more details, and in this case, it was stuck on the fact that I wasn't clarifying that logical problem. So as soon as I clarified to remove that logical conflict, it moved on. So I was super interested to see that, because that's the sort of thing you talk about in a meeting in 5 minutes, no one catches on. And then a few weeks later, when you're doing the demo, it's like, well, wait a second. And then it's like an uh-oh moment. So aside from that, and sorry, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Aside from that, it gave a lot of insights. The final document gave a lot of insights about prioritizing features, about a complete set of requirements, things that I may not have thought of, and it just saved me a ton of time in general. Obviously, putting a document together, and then finally, it made market suggestions, which was a really nice feature, gives you an idea of the market size and so on based on what you told it. So, I'm talking about being half hour, an hour into my project, and I already have a business plan. That used to be something that took much, much longer. So this tool is just super valuable in terms of getting that first step right. And then with all the extra time you have, you can focus on what matters, go through the details of the document, figure out all those important things instead of the redundant ones. Okay, so secondly, moving on to execution of this project, now that I have a business plan. This again, transformed recently and continues to be transformed, but I went ahead and put together this app, a functional app. I'm talking about like an hour by the time I got the details right. So I can answer more questions about that later, but in general, it is pretty fantastic that you can have an idea and have a working version of that idea within this, and with Codalio, a business plan in the same day. And that could shave weeks or months off of your journey to MVP. And like I said, at a time when timing and money is so important. So there's CapFlock. There's my map-based collaboration tool in that lower right-hand window. And like I said, it was a functional demo, and I'm ready to start the journey. I can now go look for investment. I can apply for funding. I can show people how it works, and that's all in one day. So needless to say, things have obviously been heavily affected by the latest tools that are become available to us. We have obviously changed the way we deliver our services as a software development company. We can change the way we communicate with our clients and speed things up. And we've definitely changed the way that we execute on the development of a project. Okay, so I hope I gave you a reasonably good perspective on the industry from the projects I've worked on, with my 16 years as a business owner, delivering products to many startup companies and in many industries. It should be clear that the tools that are being developed now are changing the way we do things. But what does that mean for us as developers? And, I think it looks to me that, we're going to have to learn faster. We're going to be developing software in different ways. But I stressed this earlier for a reason, was the importance of the development team. Because I think this is a critical moment for us. So the second takeaway I wanted you all to have from what I've seen, it's super important as developers to understand these tools. And it's also super important to be diligent. Like, so much of these projects depend on us in the planning stages and then in the execution. The final result of a startup could be make or break, based on the performance of the software team. So don't downplay how important that is. Now that we can generate more code than ever before, like, these things are just writing entire applications for us, at a small scale so far, but we'll see how that grows. But we still have to maintain the responsibility to make sure that code works, does what it's supposed to do, is secure. It can't be leaking information. We need to make sure that the code is maintainable, and so on. I mean, all of those responsibilities are still ultimately going to be on us, even though the AI has written the code for us. So just keep that in mind as you progress with your career through these crazy times. And that's it for me. I was just going to leave the rest for any questions or discussion. I kind of reviewed that blanking.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have in your session is that to just, have a quick recap and then get into our work about Codalio. Is that, so when I'm talking to a lot of founders, almost on a daily basis, and if they don't have their own in-house developers or their own technical or development code, they usually go out and start, obviously, shopping around, trying to see if they can find remote dev shops, local ones, and so on and so on. And the difficulty there is just on many levels. One of them is that if you go to dev shop A, you could be getting a quote around $50,000. B, for the same requirements, will give you maybe something around 100. Then the third one will give you some time up to about $500,000 of, worth of, put to scope. And the challenge is that the founders that are not techies, the developers, they cannot call the difference. Second, because of the fact that the whole scoping process is a time consuming, you mentioned that it's a very time consuming process. A lot of the dev shops don't do the job that you do. You spend a lot of time, I think, at minimum with a reasonably amount of time. Maybe it's about a month or two.
Yeah,
That's minimum, right?
Yeah.
To just go back and forth with the founders, with all the decision makers in that process, and even potentially with the early adopters to really understand what things should go into the, what are the steps, what are the flows, what happens after the user logs in and then wants to see a certain, what are the steps, how many clicks do you have, and what is the sort of visual you want to show to people to get started. So that's a very time consuming process. And so a lot of the dev shops chosen to just simply throw numbers. And they don't sit down with you to go through all the details because it doesn't make any sense. You can maybe probably close about 20 to 40% of all the inquiries that you get. And so it just doesn't make any sense. And again, a lot of dev shops, maybe even lowballing, pulling into the conversation. Maybe they cut a lot of corners, and maybe not. But for the most part, the ones that are competing for prize actually do that. Because the moment you start up, then that project can go on for a certain period of time, usually a couple of years. So it's an interesting, complicated, difficult process, and it's nobody's fault because creating this specific scope of a project is not easy. On the flip side, dev shops, and you can maybe confirm that, software development companies typically have 1 or 2 engineers that can actually nail this scoping piece down properly. And it's an artful process. It's an artful exercise. You have to make mistakes. How many projects did you do before you were able to do your first best scoping?
I haven't gotten the best one yet.
So it's actually even a barrier for even large institutions. I have met with dev shops of over 3,000. They only have a handful of people that can actually sit down and properly scope things. The Deloitte of Deloitte actually charge somewhere between a couple of $100,000 up to about $1 million to really just scope out everything. And that's a very expensive process. Why? Because you have a number of senior engineers from software development, from architectural engineers, from UI UX experts, from branding experts, from DevOps and cloud engineers, CEOs, co-founders on the other side, and so when you look at it, you kind of see in a typical project, you have 5, 6 to 10 very senior people. Their time is extremely valuable, sitting around the table and trying to figure things out. The funny part of it, 50% of all of those projects are actually ending up in failure. And 80% of all of those projects are actually impacted by the scoping. Almost at the very first minute of launching the first event. So this is how complicated it is. And so the whole purpose of building Codalio, based on our experience, is to just simply walk you through a process where we ask you questions, and we obviously ask those questions in plain English. We try to keep it as non-technical questions as possible, but you also have the ability to even ask questions, to elaborate more, to be educated, to brainstorm, and to produce. And you mentioned scoping would take at least a minimum month or 2. We do it in 1 month. Even in situations that actually people invest somewhere between, again, 2 months to 3 months. With all those 3 people. So that's the first piece of it. And then from there, we call it a PRD, call it requirement assessment. We also produce the technical requirements. We also produce the specific text that goes to our engineers. And at the end of that process, we actually create the first version of your blueprints that is used as a main context that you feed it back to your system throughout the whole process. And you maintain that context as you go. So there's so much that can go into this conversation, but without boring you, we just want to visually show you what it is. And obviously we can understand better about how this can be beneficial to you.
Yeah, this is the view that Dean was trying to show you us earlier. So this is the main interface of Codalio. I have one set up already, so we can speed things up. But like Ehsan mentioned, let me just close this here. So we have an interface where you can kind of come and have a conversation flow. So the very first thing you would want to do is just put in your idea, right? So in this example, I've said I want to build a wedding planning marketplace of vendors along with wedding planning AI agent to assist with planning. So basically a wedding planning app, right? So that's the very first thing that I put in. It comes back with a question, right? And like Dean was trying to explain, you kind of have to, the idea is that you would answer the questions, and the more context you give it, the more information it's going to be able to generate for you. But the product that you get is something like this. So basically,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with one prompt, we were able to generate enough context to be able to show you. But in general, because of the fact that we designed this product to be to even work with the more complex situations where you actually start to see the cracks in other tools, you can continue the chat conversation for up to about an hour until you get to the finish line, until you can actually even scope what's going to come in the next year or two. And then, but obviously in this example, one prompt with enough context could generate enough information on the prompt.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, we have different metrics that we're tracking, the different sections of, the different data that we generate. The scores, they correspond to how complete how complete it is, and the quality of the information that's in there. So the more you continue the conversation, the more context it's going to have. It's going to bring the score higher, and you're going to have a better product. But basically, what we do is let's go over some of the main things, right? So the AI system that we have here, based on that one prompt that I put in, it kind of identified the key features that this app needs to have, right? So I said I need a vendor marketplace. We have that. AI wedding planning agent. We have that. And it even starts adding some of the things that I didn't specifically mention, but it's inferring those information based on the context, right? So let's say like user authentication, for example. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, pretty standard these days for anybody. An admin dashboard. Reporting analytics. Moving on, we generate all of the things that are generally part of the development life cycle, right? Perhaps like the most important thing, let's just quickly go through some of these. So, success metrics again. Oh, sorry about that. Again, so success metrics, I didn't really mention about any of this, but it's inferring what kind of things would be calculated or, tracked if we want to measure the success of this app, right? Competitors and so on, user personas. One of the things that's really important, I mean, there's obviously all of this information here on the canvas is super important, but I would say the data model, especially when it comes to the schema that it actually generates for you. So again, if you're familiar with, the technicalities of this stuff, this kind of data model, sample model is super helpful if you want to put like a quick demo together or your MVP. We also generate some sample data, just so we can use this quickly for a demo. So user stories, big part of the development life cycle. So this is one of the key things that we generate from the prompts in our app is to be able to generate the user stories. And the reason this
If I may interject,
Yeah, absolutely.
sorry. So as Yusuf explained, in the development lifecycle, it's important for you to really be as thorough and as detailed out the way about each and every specific feature and function that goes into the application. So for the developers to really be able to match the outcome with the requirements or what goes into the minds of the founders or the project owners, you need to know the specifics of, for example, what it means to browse the vendor marketplace on such a platform and what is to be considered to be the acceptance, which basically means that when you are writing the code as a developer, you want to know what sort of edge cases or situations that you have to account. And so these things are important. So to Yusuf's point, on left-hand side of the screen, we do have the non-technical type of conversation. And on the right-hand side, we're generating everything that a developer would require to know from the user flow standpoint, from the business logic standpoint, from the sort of ICPs or ideal customer profiles that you're targeting and what they're comfortable with in terms of design principles, what are the specifics to the feature, and what are the edge cases or acceptance criteria for the developers to consider. Again, the translation of the business logic and the requirements to the technical expert, to the specific, sometimes function level requirements is a very difficult process. And as Yusuf was just explaining, and you've seen it, there is just a ton of information here that if you were to sit down and, for example, to understand what really needs to happen after the user registers, signs up, and on the interface and what happens in the back end, detailing all these things out can take a very long time. So we generate all of that as a blueprint. And sorry to steal your thunder,
Please.
but we also, as a sanity check, as Dean mentioned, we also provide sort of estimates. This is a proprietary algorithm to our platform that we developed over the years. It's very accurate. So for the first time, and I can say this confidently, in computer science and programming, there is an actual tool that you can actually prompt and say how much this thing is going to cost. It's obviously not super accurate. There are some always cases that you can be wrong, but it's a sanity check type of a tool to your point. That please.
I asked two of my developers to both connect one for me, and it was all hard.
Really? Okay.
No, assuming they're correct, but we all
Sure.
up for sure.
Amazing. So that also gives you as a founder, or even as a product owner, to be, before starting to develop or hiring people, to really understand what you're up against. Because quite often, this is what I see. Founders get together and come up with this $1 million idea. And then that $1 million idea requires a tool to be built that is going to cost you $10 million. So does that make sense? Are you really thinking ahead of time to really understand what's coming? What are you up against? What is the complexity? What type of even expertise it requires? So we even go down to say the specifics, the specifics of the tasks, and that go into different engineer types in your development team. And again, feature by feature, we are not only evaluating and defining the complexity, but we're also creating sort of an understanding of the specific task that goes to the development. And the last, but is not the least here, another. Oh, sorry. There are other things too, but we also do another sanity check to see if you are like if you really want to build this, what kind of a market you build. Does it even make any sense to build this? So another sanity check. And then once you're satisfied, and again, you can edit your canvas as well. So this is a new feature we actually pushed out just a couple of days ago after a lot of hardship. And then we get into prototyping the UI, just like the other folks. But obviously, we're not trying to copy them. We came into this on our own workflow from an entirely different perspective and angle. And then from here, you can chat to improve. You can show this to other people. And then you can simply, once you're done, and this feature is going to come out in the next month or so, you essentially get into generating the backends, deploy it on the cloud, and continue your development. So that's the vision we're going after. We think, all of the other tools are great for what they're designed to be. But I think if you're really looking for a full software development augmentation tool that really looks at the whole spectrum of other many different things that need to happen, tools like Codalio can actually be very helpful. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks so much for helping me out. And we're going to be here for any questions and comments. And so for the audience here and also virtually, you can scan this QR code to get our contacts, to get the content that we put together for this event. Okay, any questions? I think you got a lot of your, I guess, maybe questions, because like if you're building MVP, you needed to see the perspective on
Totally. It validated a lot of what he's already doing right now on that side, but as a founder myself, I don't know any of this stuff. So it gave me a lot of perspective to challenge and question and and know, so it's wrong.
And by the way, this whole scope builder thing, the PRD that you just saw on the screen, you can actually use it at no cost on our platform. And you can download it, you can share it with your developers, you can even put in your cursor, generate again 40%. Or you can just continue using our platform to get to the 80% claim that we have. And we have good, proof or data set of proof to say that we are actually providing that information.
Specifically, data pairs, data that is everything is getting from planning business planning. Or taking business planning in 1 hour, how is that is why putting yourself in the list. I mean, AI. Honestly, it has been all
Not fully
yeah.
Yes, but the platform like ours.
When you plan, you take longer time, you sit in different environments, you think you are.
You always
So
make
the idea matures.
Yeah, and
By sitting in half hour or 1 hour, you create a business plan. So how you can be more sure that it's truly.
can never be comprehensive. That's a short answer. But first of all, we're not generating your business plan. We're kind of asking a bunch of questions to generate the top levels. I mean, business plan that is slightly correlate or related to your product that you're building.
That
This
is
I
as a reference.
sorry.
That can be used as a reference, not as a full plan.
Really depends on different situations. Because, if you, for example, compare the accuracy of the data that we generate compared to the generic LLM, we're obviously a lot better because we do have guardrails that we validate a lot of things. So part of our technology is initially that we're using many different agents in the process that even as we find progressive, as we evolve, we're checking and evaluating elements.
So there are best cases that you are.
Oh, yes, for sure. This is not our first version. It's other 5 years before anything existed. It's we knew that this thing was coming. We figured it all in the data that works with the data. But there is no 100% guarantee on anything. I don't think we can find the project we're close enough to a good, accurate estimate of everything. We do have software that we make sure that the output makes sense. It's presented in the way that you can measure. But in general, in our world, in the startup world, especially, business plans are like living organisms, living species, because they change and evolve. And the time and the day that you have these big, a bunch of papers of business plans is gone, you start with minimals and then you create it. So you don't have to worry so much about the business plan.
Essentially, I was asking, my app that I built, it uses AI as part of its feature. And through that, it costs me every time somebody uses the app, the MVP to test it out. It costs me a small amount of credits that I'm using for my AI. When is it a good time to start monetizing my software and move from MVP to an actual production app?
I can tell you what I know, but I don't know if it's best sense to anybody to do. Maybe other audience, other people who know some audience and should take it. But at the end of the day, you gotta ask your customers. They're gonna tell you what they need and how much they're willing to pay for. And if you see them telling you that yes, we see the value, and it's kind of by interviewing the property, it's in the ballpark of what they would be willing to pay for, then that's right there, you gotta start charging them. But I think there's another angle to the question, which is about the utility base or the usage base kind of the charging, which is very different than the SaaS. Because in the SaaS, you have fixed costs, they monthly do your done. We're done. But then, but Lovable and the Goals, for example, they started capitalizing on the usage-based charging model, which basically means they charge you for a base fee, $20 a month, but for every prompt, you're paying the token fees. Yes. So that's a different model. It's emerging to be maybe a really reasonable model to go for. Why? Because even Microsoft CEO talked about this, that platforms like Salesforce or HubSpot, if you have one single license of user, that may be even enough for an organization of many employees and users. Why? Because there are some desktop AI agents that can act like a user, automatically go to those solutions with one login and do everything on behalf of your entire team. So the whole industry is kind of thinking about shifting from fixed cost subscription model into utility based, and really depends on your industry. I've seen people bypassing integration by just buying the other tools from ERPs, or just using one AI desktop agent. Then their user interface is interacting with their user. And then on the back end, instead of buying license per user, they're having one AI agent, you doing the work and putting the data back onto the UI. So you don't want to be finding yourself in that situation of using you selling one license, but that one license is actually used as an integration to a much bigger platform. So you got to be very careful about how you price it. For us, you don't know what it is, to be honest. We're not going to rush it. We're putting a number on it now. We're trying to see what happens. But even us, we may be forced on to go into utilities.
If you go for me, 100%.
Maybe. I don't think anybody knows. I don't know how this can be something. Any questions on the chat? I think not. Okay.
Well, thank you, Ehsan, and your team.